Good evening, everyone. I'm Daniel Benjamin. I'm the president of the Academy. I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's lecture, Seeking the Truth, A Journalist's Journey, featuring Mona El-Naggar, this semester's Holt-Spring Fellow. And Mona will shortly be sharing her reflections on her several decades as an international reporter and filmmaker. And I just want to reassure you that Friedrich Merz is still the chancellor now. Yeah, I knew that was on everyone's mind. So let me just say a word about this fellowship. It was established in 1999, back in the Academy's infancy, with the generous support of the Holt-Spring Publishing Group. The fellowship was created to foster German-American dialogue in journalism and literature and scholarship, and has done so in a remarkable way. We are enormously grateful to the Holt-Spring family for their continued support, and particularly to Stefan von Holt-Spring, who is the chairman of the firm and a long-standing trustee, and currently our vice chairman. And he is really one of our absolutely most valuable players. Let me just say that the role of people who've had this fellowship is really quite remarkable. Among them, Jonathan Safran Foer, Nicole Krauss, Sigrid Nunez, Cristina Rivera Garza, who made us proud last year and won a Pulitzer Prize, and of course, tonight's speaker, Mona El-Naggar. So it's really a pleasure to introduce Mona. She is an acclaimed international journalist. I have a soft spot for the people like that, and documentary filmmaker, and her work spans nearly 2 decades. She holds a bachelor's in political economy from Georgetown and a master's in news and documentary from NYU. For many years, she served as a correspondent for the New York Times, a newspaper I imagine you've all heard of, and she has reported from virtually every country in the Arab world, and her journalism often explores the fault lines of politics, gender, religion, youth, and culture. She has earned some of the industry's highest honors. She was a Pulitzer Prize finalist for a written story and then a short film that followed the radicalization of a young Egyptian man, and she has been nominated, according to her, for now 5 or 6 Emmys. The latest nomination came in yesterday. She said, yeah. She was asked how many nominations, and she gave the answer 5 or 6, and I sympathize because I'm always forgetting how many of those nominations I've had. She has also won the National Press Photographers Association's Best of Photojournalism Award. As a filmmaker, Mona has directed Ladies First, which was the New York Times' first feature-length documentary, which follows 3 Saudi women running for office and voting for the first time. She also created The Story of Ezra, a short film examining post-revolution Egypt through one woman's fight for independence. During her years with the Times, Mona has been chased by stone-throwing youths at a funeral in Jordan, shadowed by Hamas operatives in Gaza, confronted by Libyan secret police, and was one of the first journalists to embed with Houthi rebels in Yemen. So she has a very well-refined sense of fun. There's even more evidence of that because after 18 years with the Times, she has gone out on her own as a freelance. While she's been here at the Academy, she is working on a feature-length documentary that follows 3 young Palestinian cinematographers living in Gaza, Bali, and Dubai as they come of age against the backdrop of war. She is also working on a series of essays entitled Behind the Byline, which illuminate the lives of young Arab women navigating the really extraordinary pressures that they are under. as they seek to defy the expectations that are upon them. The project blends reported narrative with personal reflection and explores the themes of identity, politics, sexuality, and Mona's own evolving relationship to her native Egypt as a journalist, as a mother, and as a woman. Tonight, we're going to learn more about her craft, and we'll get a glimpse into the projects she is pursuing. She will speak for about 35 minutes, followed by a Q&A session with the audience. If you are here and have a question to ask, you can do it in the traditional way. The microphone will come to you. Feel free to ask a question as long as it has a question mark at the end. And if you're joining by Vimeo, please type your question in the Q&A box of the website, and Mona will keep an eye on that queue. So without any additional delay, Mona, the podium is yours.
Hi. Three years ago, I came to Berlin by chance. I had no plan, just an overwhelming need to step away. For nearly 2 decades, I had worked as a journalist, moving through the violence and grief of the Middle East. Egypt, Lebanon, Gaza, Syria, Yemen. I learned how to interview mothers who had lost their children, how to stand inside refugee camps and conflict zones with a steady hand. I learned to witness without feeling, and I thought that was strength. But I've come to believe something different. That in the face of overwhelming suffering, context can clarify, but it can also numb. That objectivity can inform, but it can also excuse. And that to bear witness is not just to see, it's to feel. This is a talk about witnessing and about what gets erased when we do it without empathy. I started out doing the work, Cairo, then New York, then back to Cairo as Middle East correspondent in 2020. When I landed in Egypt with my husband and daughter, they were waved through passport control. I was pulled aside. My name had been flagged. I followed the low-ranking officer into an unmarked office, national security. The contents of my backpack, magazines, a notebook, were emptied and questioned. A plainclothes officer asked why I had brought so many issues of the New Yorker, why there were protests on the covers, why I was reading about Putin. The officer was stern and intimidating. He told me to sit up straight, uncross my legs. The message was clear. We're in control. We're watching you. It happened every time I traveled. I would report on human rights trials, on sexual assaults inside state institutions, on the silent deaths of COVID patients from oxygen shortages the government denied even existed. And every time, before publishing, I check with lawyers and editors. How risky is this one? Could I get arrested? The reality was, it was impossible to know. And the hope was that because I worked for the New York Times, a loud and powerful American institution, I might still enjoy some protection, a protection most Egyptian journalists did not have. Every time I passed through Cairo airport, especially after publishing a sensitive story, my editors tracked my phone. I told myself I was used to it, but I wasn't really. It wore me down. So did the stories. The Beirut explosion in Lebanon that tore through the city and killed at least 200 people. The 2021 Israeli assault on Gaza that killed more than 260. At least 65 of them were children. Working with colleagues in London and Jerusalem, we published a story placing a photo of every child killed in the war on the front page of the Times. Nearly all were Palestinian. That story hit differently because it was exceptionally hard to talk to parents who had just lost their children. The helplessness they expressed made me nauseous. It was also hard to hear them, literally. The lines were bad. Israeli drones buzzed in the background. I'd have to ask grieving parents to repeat the same devastating details over and over again, just so I could get the story right. I found myself screaming through the noise. When we finally had the story, I stayed up through the night, pushing back against edits that would drown the piece in political context. I wanted readers to sit with the scale of the loss. My editors listened. When I looked back at that story while preparing for this talk, these lines caught my attention. Gaza is crowded and its population skews young, with about half under age 18. So when Israeli warplanes hit homes and residential neighborhoods, the number of children at risk is extraordinary. Sometimes nearly entire households disappear with a single blast. I thought about those numbers then, and I thought about the numbers now. How many pages would it take today to print every child's face? I also wrote a story on how Hamas had expanded its rocket arsenal, and another on the growing online solidarity with Palestinians. I look back now and wonder, what changed? More lives lost and destroyed. Many, many more. And yet, covering that war was not transformative. I kept moving. I had grown used to violence. I had grown used to how the value of life seemed to shift depending on who it belonged to. I remember one disaster early on in my career. A ferry carrying poor laborers returning from Saudi Arabia to Egypt had capsized in the Red Sea. Many drowned. I joined their families at the port as police projected photos of the dead onto a rough, dirty wall. The images were unclear, some faces bloodied and disfigured. Family members were instructed to raise their hands when they recognized someone. Sometimes more than one hand went up. Their humiliation didn't end with death. It continued in how their deaths and loved ones were handled. That day, something in me broke. Because it's one thing to understand injustice in your head, in reports, in numbers, in policy language. It's another to watch it unfold acutely through someone's grief, up close. That kind of truth settles in your body, and it doesn't leave. And even when I wasn't focused on the region, I produced stories and consumed atrocity like a habit. Police taking out the eyes of protesters in Chile, terror attacks on churches in Sri Lanka, African migrants drowning in the Mediterranean, Venezuelan refugees stuck at the Colombia border, and the ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya in Myanmar. I remember the first time I landed in a Rohingya refugee camp in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. I listened to one tragic tale after another. Families gunned down as they fled, women raped, homes and dignity erased. I couldn't tell you exactly what I felt, but I remember how I struggled to lift my feet as I walked through those squalid camps. My body tightened. I kept pushing. But with some of the adversity comes relief. In Bangladesh, it was the fresh papaya juice. And I remember finally landing back in New York and sensing that it had gotten harder to slip back into a regular routine with poker nights, happy hours, and a hopeful child. My daughter was one. I indulge in telling the story because I think it speaks to the moment I know some of us find ourselves in. struggling to accept the daily slaughter of innocent lives broadcast before our eyes every single day. Slaughter that is witnessed, documented, still allowed to continue, with governments complicit and many of us numbed. And yet we keep going, because that's what we're trained to do. Keep moving, stay detached, hold the line. At some point, I had come to mistake detachment for the objective lens, a lens that could sometimes pit our professionalism against our humanity and frame distance as balance, even when the story calls for moral clarity. A lens that could explain injustice instead of confront it. And yet, it was also why I loved journalism. It revealed the world to me, one detail at a time, often the worst of it. It didn't stop, and I didn't stop either. The breaking point came quietly. 3 years ago, when I came to Berlin to switch off, I didn't know what I was looking for. But in that silence, something shifted. And when I was meant to return to work, I woke up that morning and I couldn't do it. I had lost interest. Or maybe what I lost was conviction. I wasn't burned out. I was emptied out. I had lost the very thing that made me want to do this work in the first place, the sense of discovery, of possibility. So after 18 years, I quit. I gave myself space to sit with the uncertainty. I needed that time to recalibrate. And about a year later, on October 7th, my editors called and asked if I could jump back in. I was ready. I filed my first story, an interview with a son whose mother, an Israeli peace activist, was killed on October 7th. Days later, when the war reached Gaza, I looked at the Times homepage and I saw devastation, destruction, rubble, screams, bodies pulled from the wreckage, just what some called war porn. But no names, no clear voices. And that's a problem. When the images are graphic, but the people are faceless, it doesn't create empathy. It creates distance. When all we hear is wailing, with no voice behind it, no name, no story, it becomes noise. It overwhelms, but it doesn't connect. I messaged my editors, frustrated. We had to do better. I would like to get voices, but like relatable voices, because frankly, the wailing and the overall look and language we tend to capture is flat and doesn't translate into English. Just thinking out loud here. For starters, I want to find someone who speaks English and can capture in words what she is experiencing. So I started calling contacts in Gaza. You know, someone young, someone who speaks English, who can describe what they're seeing. I wanted someone we could listen to, someone we could relate to. And maybe instinctively, I wanted that person to be a young woman. We skew male when we look for authoritative voices. I wanted something else. That's how I found Plestia. She had just graduated from journalism school. She was filming her world falling apart. And she was broadcasting it to the world. A genocide, live. Her voice cut through the noise, calm, clear, and deeply human, in a moment when so much of Gaza was being dehumanized. And the world noticed. Her audience grew exponentially. Today, she has more than 4 million followers. I stayed in touch with Plestia throughout the war, and through her reluctant departure from Gaza, when she fled with her mother, sister, and grandmother to Australia, where one of her uncles lives. And over time, I came to see how deliberate she was in reclaiming her own narrative, and in staying true to her mission, to show not just the horror, but the humanity. She's now one of the central voices in a feature documentary I've been working on since June, a project I've continued during my time here at the Academy. Here's part of a teaser we put together along the way, just a flavor of the work in progress.
يلا you take care of the onions تفضلي. هاي بس
ومين علمك تطبخي؟ تيتا ولا لحالك؟
لحالي.
ما تغسل البصل بضايقكيش يعني؟
يا
طايتيش
ماشي. كله إلا طعيتي.
آي طب إيش شعورك عن جد؟
شعوري إنه staying here. بس أمانة ما تسيبيني أقلق عليكي. دايما خليني proud of you as usual as I'm always.
أنا تعبت أكون شخص مثالي بنفس فخورة.
حبيبتي يلا ديري بالك. ديري بالك.
What is home at the end of the day, or where is home? I don't feel a sense of belonging. She's not here, she's not there, she's above. Like a dead body, a dead soul. I didn't see that, for the rest of my life I will be living in Gaza. But I know that Gaza exists, my life there exists, I have a home that I can go back to. But now where is home that you'll go back to?
والله لو بيصير إنه تنتهي الحرب ويفتحوا الباب طريق لغزة لألاقيها بغزة.
Because I know where my roots are.
Mama, you don't understand. Sometimes I feel scared as any mom.
She's just a mom, I'm just a girl. ولدت هنا ولدت هناك لست هنا لست هناك. So I'm from here, I'm from there, I'm not here, I'm not there.
At the start of this war, I considered diving deep into the infrastructure of Hamas, the kind of investigative, layered, explanatory reporting that I'm often drawn to. But it felt like an indulgence against the pressing and somewhat obvious reality of the moment. I couldn't look away from the ongoing brutality, the disregard for human life. That felt more urgent and more necessary. I wanted to witness and center the human story, not to explain, but to ask, to feel, to get closer. And as much as we try to explain this war through the lens of complexity, history, geopolitics, irreconcilable narratives, as though that complexity justifies the carnage, I couldn't settle for that. I think this framework is evasive, muddied, and morally questionable. The endless stream of facts didn't clarify. It obscured. Not all victims were treated equally. And it seemed clear to me. The extent of our empathy shapes what stories we tell and how we tell them. It shapes who gets a name and who stays invisible. It shapes whose grief feels universal and whose grief gets explained away. Even when we try to do our best, we carry assumptions we don't examine. People often criticize Western media coverage of this war, accusing it of deep pro-Israel bias, often imagining some hidden editorial agenda. But in my experience, the problem isn't overt prejudice. It's the inherited instincts, like identifying with people who look like us, live like us, and speak our language. Finding common ground with their pain and loss, and then struggling to see their counterparts, their so-called enemies, as equally deserving of freedom and compassion. It's defaulting to language that flattens asymmetry, creating a false sense of moral equivalence between deeply unequal sides. It's assigning credibility to state actors over so-called non-state players, as if governments didn't also peddle propaganda, manufacture information, and violate international law. What if it were 200 white English-speaking journalists who had died in this war? It's the shorthand of language, using Hamas as a catch-all to discredit, using terrorism freely, but avoiding words like occupation and genocide, even when they're coded. It's failing to rise to the task of questioning the deeper narrative frameworks that shape our gaze and govern our moral response, like calling Israel a democracy while ignoring the apartheid-like conditions it enforces. To be clear, these distortions aren't unique to this war. They appear across conflicts and contexts. But the severity and cruelty of this moment, in a time of extreme polarization, has brought them into sharper focus. It's not excess bias. It's a deficit of empathy. It's not ideology. It's emotional architecture. This invisible scaffolding of feeling that shapes whose pain we register, whose voices we trust, and whose deaths we treat as inevitable. And yes, that architecture is shaped by race, by class, by colonial history, by power. Even the most respected institutions aren't immune. So I chose to face this war with my heart as much as my head. After a year away from the job, I had found something I didn't realize I'd lost: moral outrage. I told the immediate stories I could. A poet arrested and humiliated by Israeli soldiers as he fled with his family. He just won, actually, a Pulitzer for commentary. Yeah, in the New Yorker, yes. Yes. Mus'ab Abu Toha, that's his name. A filmmaker in DC who struggled to reach his family in Gaza and lost his closest sister in a strike just weeks after we spoke. A doctor on a medical mission in one of Gaza's last functioning hospitals, documenting the daily horrors in a diary. A journalist who risked death to cover the carnage, only to realize it would change nothing. An 11-year-old girl, Dareen, airlifted to Qatar for treatment after losing 47 family members, including her parents and grandparents, in a single airstrike.
أنا لما أضلني أنقل حالي من هذا لهذا من هذا لهذا بيكون في وجع، لأنه كني بحس إنه في حد قاعد بيضربني بشاكوش بعصاية خشب بركبي.
To pain. Where's the pain?
والألم كله بركبي.
I'm going to measure how much you can bend or extend your knees. Let me know if it's
أما ما
painful.
توجعوني أما ماسك آي. يعني ليش إحنا مش زي ولاد الناس؟ نفسي أفهم أنا، نفسي أفهم هما ليش هما هيك بيعملوا فينا. أنا يعني أكيد إنه الناس بيقدروش يستغنوا عن أهاليهم، وأنا كمان أول مرة أحس إنه أمي مش جنبية وأبويا مش جنبية. أنا ليش ما روحتش معهم؟ أنا كان نفسي أروح على الجنة، نتحدث أنا وياهم بالجنة. ليش أنا هيك صار معي؟
Her voice still haunts me. It cuts through the enormity of this war with a kind of unbearable simplicity. Why aren't we like other children? Why did they do this to us? Why didn't I go with my parents? Why did this happen to me? They're questions without answers, but they are the right questions. They encapsulate a child's impossible attempt to make sense of loss. And they're questions I struggle with myself. So, in pursuit of answers and out of a sense of moral obligation, I'm making a film that moves between the chaos of war and the quiet weight of its aftermath. It follows two young Palestinian journalists from Gaza who documented the war in real time and now carry its memory in exile. One of them, Muhammad, learned after fleeing Gaza that his 14-year-old brother, Yahya, had been killed while out searching for food. It appears to have been a targeted strike near the Netzarim corridor, an Israeli zone of occupation that Haaretz described as a kill zone for Palestinians. I had met Yahya once, briefly, over FaceTime. Muhammad and I were still getting to know each other, walking down a Cairo street, and he handed me his phone. Yahya's face lit up the screen. He was funny, curious, radiant. Weeks later, Muhammad called to say Yahya had been killed. Muhammad had since reached out to the Hind Rajab Foundation, a Belgian-based legal group investigating potential war crimes using the principle of universal jurisdiction. Their team of lawyers and activists gathers open-source evidence, including videos posted by Israeli soldiers, and files legal complaints in countries where those soldiers may travel. Yahya's case is now one of their central investigations. One of the remarkable things about Muhammad is the archive he carries, not just from the war, but from before it. It's full of small, tender family moments. Like this one, where he's teaching Yahya how to swim.
خشش عليا كتير.
It's stories like this, deeply personal and politically charged, that remind me why this kind of witnessing matters. And why so many people, not just journalists, but filmmakers, poets, TikTokers, and ordinary citizens, are documenting, archiving, refusing to look away. There is extraordinary work being done in service of truth. That gives me hope. And sometimes that truth shows up in unexpected places, like Berlin's graffiti and bathroom stalls. That's what I try to do. Seek the simplest truths, hold the lens steady, and ask, are we telling the right story? Are we asking the right questions? Are we still watching through the eyes of the powerful? Or are we willing to turn to the margins, where so many lives have been made invisible? I want to leave you for a moment with Muhammad. Here's a raw and roughly cut scene just for this room.
بفتح الجوال، صاحبي شهيد، أخويا شهيد، جثث، أشلاء، أطفال مقطع. أنت ذكرى حلوة من جد. Okay, goodbye, nice to meet you. I wish I bring my camera. هنا افهم ايش اللي بيصير. You speak English?
Yes.
What is this?
Oh, it's actually a real surgeon. Yeah, surgeon. So,
And his body inside?
his body is. You see that crate, like the big white crate? Yeah, that's it. He's
Well, which
inside.
one? Really?
Yeah.
And this is
behind it.
all this is gonna be fire.
Yeah. This after all the ceremony ended, this all gonna be like
Fire.
put it on a flame. Yes.
What's channel? Palestine TV. Palestina TV. Palestina.
Palestina.
Yeah. Gaza.
Thank you so much.
ما شاء الله. حسب راحة هان. مش عارف ليش. يا إلهي. Palestine. Yeah. نفسي أعيش هان أقسم بالله. بس نفسي أعيش هناك كمان. غزة كيف بدها تصير مش عارف. Can I sing for you?
What do you think? Yes.
Sing about Gaza. Okay?
Yeah.
عصفور طل من الشباك وقال لي يا نونو خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو. قلت له انت من وين؟ قال لي من حدود السماء. قلت له هارب من مين؟ قال لي من القفص هربان. قلت له ريشاتك وين؟ قال لي فرفضها السما، قال لي من القفص هربان. عصفور عصفور
عصفور طل من الشباك وقال لي يا نونو خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو، خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو. آه آه آه.
I came to Berlin 3 years ago to turn away. I'm here now because I couldn't, and because I no longer want to. Because the story isn't just about what happened. It's about what we choose to see and what we refuse to ignore. Thank you for being here.